Hello, and welcome to the School of Product Design Photoshop tutorials. So, let's get started. If we go up here to the top left-hand corner, you can see here it says File. Click on File, select New, and this window will pop up. Now, the actual window itself differs from different versions of Photoshop, but they're essentially the same. So basically here, what we're going to do is set up the canvas to work on. We want to make sure that everything here is set to millimeters. And we are now going to be working with a A3 size canvas. So for width, we want to make sure that it says 420. And for the height, we want to make sure it says 297. So we've got 420 millimeters for the width, 297 millimeters for the height. Now the last thing we need to do before we hit OK is to make sure we have the correct resolution. And because you're actually working with a print document, well, eventually this is going to be printed, we want to make sure the resolution is correct. So the correct resolution for creating print documents in Photoshop is 300. So just make sure this here says 300, and then go ahead and click OK. And here we go. This is your brand new canvas. Okay, so before we go ahead and start working in Photoshop, we need to make sure to save the file. So I'm going to go back up to the file again in the top left hand corner, click File, go to Save As, and this window will pop up. So all you have to do here is check the file name, give it any file name that you want. I'm just going to call it Sample. Now for the format below here, if you click on this little bar, you have a whole bunch of different options for saving the file. But for now, we want to make sure that you have Photoshop.psd selected. So we'll just do that. So here we go. My file name is Sample, and the format is in Photoshop.psd. Save. Okay, so let's go ahead now and bring in an image to Photoshop that we can edit. So I'm going to go up to the top left hand corner, once again to File, and this time I'm going to go to Open. Now I've clicked Open, and I have a folder here with lots of example images. I'm going to go ahead now and click on the BMW logo as an example. Go Open. And now we have the logo opened up in Photoshop. Okay, so now we have the image here opened up in Photoshop. I now want to go ahead and bring this image across into the main canvas that we just created. So I'm going to go ahead now and click Control A. Now, when you click Control A, you'll probably notice a moving dotted line around the perimeter of the image. This means that the image has been selected. So now I'm going to go ahead and go Control C to copy that image. Then I'm going to click on the original PSD that we just created, Sample PSD. And then I'll go ahead now and click Control V for paste. And now the image that we opened up in the other file is now pasted into the main file so we can work with it. Okay, so now I want to go ahead and actually just change the size of this BMW logo here. Now, anytime you're actually going to change the size of an image, it's really important to set it as what's called a smart object. So, if I go to the right hand side of the screen, you can see here it says Layers. There's a Layers window or panel. Now, just to the right of that, there is a little icon here. Now, if I press that, I have a whole selection of options that I can choose from. So like I said, we want to change the size of an image, and the best way to change the size of an image is to make sure that it is a smart object. So I'm going to go here and click Convert to Smart Object. Okay, so now we have this logo as a smart object, And now we can go ahead and start manipulating it. So what you can do is hold down Control T, and this transformation window will pop up. You can also go here to Edit in the top left hand corner, go down and select Free Transform. Selecting Free Transform and using Control T are the same. Now, you can tell that it is a smart object because when I go Control T, a square appears around the image plus a cross in the middle. So now I can go ahead and start changing the size of this image. Okay, so let's go ahead now and start changing the dimensions of this image. There are a couple of ways that you can do this, and they all have different effects. So for example, if I put my mouse cursor over the little square here in the corner, I click, hold, and drag, you can see that I can change the dimensions of this image. I can also put the mouse cursor just off from the corner of the square, and I can rotate. Okay, so we've come to the point now where we are able to change the dimensions of this image. Now just remember there's some do's and don'ts to doing this. So for example, if I click here on the dot and change its dimensions, just remember that having an image squashed like this or like this, it's just that little bit amateur. Okay, so a really good way of scaling your images is that if you click on the square, hold down Shift, you can see how the proportions are locked, like so. So I can also click on Shift and Alt and click the corner here, and as you can see, it enlarges or scales the image from the very center. So I'm now going to go ahead and just make it a little bit bigger here like that, and just hit enter, and it's punched in. Okay, so we have now successfully changed the scale or dimensions of this image. Now, there's just one quick thing I want to tell you guys that's really important. So for example, if I move this image over somewhere else, but want to put it back to where it was before, all I have to do is hit Control Z to undo. Control Z basically means undo the last move. So I go Control Z, and it brings it back here. And for example, if I go Control T to transform, and I change the size of it, or made a mistake like this, I can hit Control Z, and it's back to where it was. Same thing here, if I go Control T, and maybe I'm mucking around with the rotation of it, hit enter like so, but I want to bring it back to where it was. Once again, Control Z, and it's back to where it was. Okay, so now what we can do is try out some different types of transformation with this image. So once again, I'll go up to Edit here in the top left hand corner, go down the menu, and you can see we have Free Transform or Control T, which is what I showed you before. But below that we have Transform. And we have all these different cool ways that we can actually transform the image. So for example, if I go to Flip Horizontal, it'll flip it horizontally. We could try Flip Vertical, and it does that. Or we can even do things like Distort. This is pretty cool. You can just actually distort the image with perspective, which looks super cool. It's not squashed, but it's definitely really cool in terms of showing a really cool perspective, like so. And I'll just click undo. So if you have the chance, feel free to go and muck around with these different types of transformations. They're all pretty cool, and it's a lot of fun. So, the next thing I'd like to show you guys is two simple tools which will help with your workflow in Photoshop. One is zooming, and the other one is panning. So what I can do is I can go ahead here and hit Control plus, and watch what happens. The image zooms in, and Control minus to zoom back out. Now, if you're actually zoomed quite well in, and you want to sort of look at different areas of the image, what you can do is pan. So this is really easy. All you have to do is hold down the space bar, and when you hold it down, watch your cursor, it will turn into a little hand. Now with the space bar held down, you can now use the mouse, click left mouse button, and you can go ahead and change the panning of the image. There you go, like that. Space bar, hold down the left mouse button, and you can pan. And I'll bring it back out again. Here we go. So the next thing I'd like to demonstrate is rulers in Photoshop. And rulers are a really powerful way of making sure all the images on your canvas are nicely aligned and crisp and clean. So what we can do to bring up the rulers in Photoshop is you hold down Control and click R. Now when you do that, you will notice rulers pop up at the top of the window and the left hand side of the window. Now, if you just watch really carefully, Control R. Now the rulers have appeared. Now if you can't see them, hit Control R again. So for example here, the rulers are already visible. If I go Control R, they're gone, but if I hit it again, they appear again. So we have the rulers already visible now. Now there's one thing that we can do to change the metric system of the rulers. If I go ahead now and go to the ruler at the top here and right click on the ruler, it'll give me a bunch of options to select the type of metric system we want to use. In our case, it's probably better if we use either centimeters or millimeters. I'm actually going to set it to millimeters. Here we go. Okay, so an extension of using the rulers is a system called guides. And guides are a really good way of making sure everything you have is nicely aligned. Now, to put guides into your document, it's pretty easy. So if I go ahead now and put my mouse cursor over the top ruler here, I hold down the left mouse button, and then I drag down into the image, and watch what happens. See, there you go, you get a guide. If I want to add another one, same thing. I can go to the top ruler, hold down left mouse button, drag down, and create guides. It's the same thing as well for the left hand side. If I go here to the left hand side to the vertical ruler, click and drag in, it'll make a guide. So I'll just make a few guides here. Now, once the guides have been placed, you can actually still move them. It's quite easy. All you have to do is put your mouse cursor just over the guide, and you will see, watch here, you'll see the icon changes into a line and two arrows. And here I can change the guides and its position, like so. Now, what happens if I actually want to get rid of the guides? I don't need them anymore. There's a few ways of doing this. If you just want to erase just one guide in the document, you can go ahead, put your mouse over the guide, the icon changes, and you drag back into the ruler, like so. And this, one by one, gets rid of all the guides. Now, if you have lots of guides, it might be a little bit annoying having to do this one by one. So what you can do is, if you want to clear all the guides in the document, you can go here to View at the top menu here, go down, and then you can say here, Clear Guides. And there you go, all the guides are gone. Now, imagine if you have a few guides on your canvas at the moment, and you just want to get rid of its visibility, but not erasing it. So for example, here I've got a whole bunch of guides in my document that I still want to use, but I just want to turn off its visibility so I can have a better look at my canvas. I can go ahead here to View, go down. Now you see here, this is what it says Show. I can go down and go to Guides and untick that, and the guides will disappear. But they've only disappeared by visibility. They're actually still there. So I can go back to View, go back to Show, and select Guides again, and they'll come back, like so. Okay? But I'll just go ahead now and clear the guides. So, lastly with guides, I want to show you how to sort of set them up so you can create some nice alignments with your images. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically make some guides here again. I'll make one here, say at the bottom, and I'll make one here, say at the side. Now, watch what happens. I'm going to select the layer that the logo is on in the layers window. I'll just move that over there. You can see layers. There's the layer here with the logo. And now I'm going to press V for the Move tool. The Move tool is visible here at the top left-hand corner of the toolbar, or you can just hit V. Now with V, I can move the image freely around. So I want to use the guides to I want to use the guides here to properly align this image. Okay, so say for example I wanted to create a nice horizontal arrangement of images. What I can do is use the guides to snap the image into place. So watch really carefully. If I go here and I'm going to click V for Move tool, you can also get the Move tool here in the top left hand corner. Now I'm going to go ahead now and then move this image to the horizontal guide. Watch what happens. It'll snap like so. So there you go. It's snapped to the horizontal guide, and after bringing it across here, it'll snap to the vertical guide as well, like so. You see? So now we actually have the image here snapped to the both vertical and horizontal guides. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just make this image a little bit smaller. So with that layer selected, I'm going to go ahead now and go Control T. As you can see, the transformation marquee has appeared. Just going to make it a little bit smaller, like so. Now, watch what happens. I'm just going to go Control A to select all, Control C to copy, and then Control V to paste, and it will make a brand new copy of that logo, like so. And so watch what happens here. What I want to do is basically, as an example, align all the images horizontally. So I can go down here and it'll snap, paste again, and put it here, and it snaps. So now you can see all the images are perfectly horizontally aligned. Okay, and now just as a quick note, you need to make sure that when you have the Move tool selected with either V or clicking the top button on the panel here. There's an option here that says Auto Select. It's near the top left hand corner. Auto Select. Now, make sure that's clicked and the tick appears. Now, what this does is that basically means that it's a really easy way of moving all the different components around. So with Auto Select on, I can put the mouse over this logo here, and I can click and hold and move that around. But then if I put my mouse over this logo and click, I can move that one around, and the third one like so. So just remember to have Auto Select ticked in this particular instance. So now one last thing I just want to teach you when it comes to guides and alignment. I was talking before about snapping. So for example here, I take this logo, and if I move it really near the guide, it'll snap. Same thing here, if I put it to the vertical one, and it'll snap. Now, there might be a instance where it's not snapping, and you're thinking, what's going on? You have to make sure there is a few settings that are enabled to make sure snapping occurs. So if I go up here to View, this is at the top menu here, I'll go to View. Now if I go down, there is a couple of things that you need to activate to make sure the snapping occurs. Now snapping could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on your situation, but at the moment, let's say we want things to snap. So for example, make sure here snap is ticked. Now if you go down just one slot to snap to, you will have a whole bunch of different options. So make sure snap is ticked, and you go below that to snap to, and make sure it's snapping to guides. So the next thing I'd like to show you guys is working with multiple images in the one document. And this is done by opening up and copying and pasting external images into this canvas, the main canvas, sample.psd. So as you can see here, I've got the first logo that I'm going to be using. I might just put that off to the side a little bit here. And then, like I showed you before, I'm going to bring in 2 more images as an example. So I'm going to go up here to File, Open. I'm going to pick another document here. I'll pick this really cool NASA logo. Go Open. And now, as you can see, it's opened up this logo in a different window. So I'm going to go ahead and go Control A for Select All, Control C to copy. I'm going to go back to my original canvas, sample.psd, and then I'm going to go paste. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically go ahead and pick one more logo. So once again, File, Open. Let's pick, how about the Apple logo here? Click on that, go Open. As you can see, it's opened up this image in another new file. Once again, Control A for Select All, Control C for copy, go back to the original, and Control V for paste. I'm just going to move that over a little bit here. Okay, so we've got all 3 images now in the one document. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to be working with is layers in Photoshop, and layers is a very important component of this program. So, as you can see, I have copied and pasted 3 images into the Photoshop canvas. And what happens is, every time you paste in a new image into Photoshop, it turns up as a layer here in this window. So this here is the layers window. It's on the right hand side of the screen under layers, and you can see this list of layers here. And each layer represents an image that you have pasted in. So at the moment it just says background, layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. Now layer 1, layer 2, and layer 3 as names isn't very helpful. because you have a really hard time figuring out what that layer is. So what I can do here is this. On the left hand side of the layers, you have these eyeballs, and what you can do is you can turn them off, and when you turn them off, that layer becomes invisible. I'll turn them back on again like so. So we want to go ahead now and actually name these layers. When you name them, it will just make the organization a lot more easier. So I'm going to go ahead here and untick these ones. And as you can see here, we have just the BMW logo. So I'm going to go ahead now and go to that layer here. I'm going to double click on the name, and it gives you the opportunity to change that layer name. So I'm just going to call that BMW. Turn that off. Now I'm going to go ahead and change this one here. This is NASA. And then I'm going to go ahead and make this one visible. It's the Apple logo. I'm going to call that Apple. And I'm going to turn them all on now. So now, as you can see, I have this nicely organized layers window here, with each layer appropriately named depending on its image: BMW, NASA, and Apple. So I've got my layers all ready to go. The next thing I actually want to do is just make the NASA and the Apple logos just a little bit bigger, so they kind of are more in alignment with the BMW logo. But what I actually might do here is just to shrink this BMW logo just a little bit, like so. And then I'm now going to go ahead and click Apple. Now, remember before I was talking about smart objects that you need to use while you're scaling your images. So, for example, here I've got the Apple layer selected. Now I want to go ahead and make sure it's a smart object. So I'm going to go to this little list icon here on the right hand corner of the layers window. I'm going to click on that, and then it says here convert to smart object. So I want to make sure that's selected. Right. Now you can tell that it's a smart object. If you look at the layer of Apple, there's a small little icon in the bottom right hand corner of that little window preview, and that tells you it's a smart object. Another way you can check as well is that if I'm actually on that Apple layer and I go Control T to transform, you can tell it's got the classic smart object interface, which is a square and an X through it. So I'm going to go ahead now and just scale that up a little bit. There we go. Move that over here. And then I'm going to move the BMW logo just a little bit over here as well. Okay, cool. Okay, so my logos are almost ready here, but there is one little slight problem, and I'll show you right now. If I turn off the BMW logo and the Apple one and the background, you can see if I zoom in, there's all this white area here that's like wasted space. And we want to get rid of that as well, because it'll make things a little bit more hard down the line if we don't do something about it. So what I'm going to do is I just want to utilize just the area of the logo without this white space. So we're going to use selection tools to help get rid of this wasted space. So for example here, I'm going to go up to the left hand corner of the Photoshop window. Now on the toolbar on the left hand side, there is, second down from the top, there is a marquee tool here. Now what happens is this: if I go ahead now and click the left mouse button and hold it down, I get these different options of selection tools that I can use in Photoshop. What I'd like to use is what's called the rectangular marquee tool. So I'm going to select that, and now you can see the icons change to a rectangular marquee tool. So remember, left-hand toolbar, second down from the top, hold down on that icon with the left mouse button, and you'll get these options here. Okay, cool. Okay, so let's fix this logo. It's pretty simple. I'm going to make sure the NASA layer is selected here. I've got that clicked. Okay, and I've got my rectangular marquee tool ready here. So what I'm going to do is this. If you click, well, actually, I might just turn on the background first. It's easier to see. I've got the marquee tool here ready to go. So watch what happens. If I click the left-hand mouse button and hold it down and drag, as you can see, it is drawing a rectangular marquee of any shape or size. Shape being different types of rectangles, like so. Now if I hold down Shift and draw a marquee, of course, it'll do a perfect square. And if I draw it with the Alt button held down, it'll draw from the center. So that's the marquee tool. Okay? Left click, and you can draw some really cool rectangles here like this. So what I want to do with this NASA logo is I want to keep as much as the logo as possible and get rid of all the extra white space that I don't need. So essentially, when you're using selection tools, when you select something, it is essentially that is the part of the image you want to keep. So I'm going to turn off the background here. And as you can see, it's displaying all this white area that I don't want. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to go here, I'm going to click, and then draw a rectangle around the logo. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. So this is what happens. Once again, the rectangle marquee shows me what I want to keep. So what do I do with the parts of the image I don't want to keep? Well, it's simple. You go Control-Shift-I. Watch what happens. So you can now see this marquee here, and you can also see the marquee around the edge of the canvas. So between this rectangle here and the rectangle on the edge of the canvas, that is what you're going to get rid of. So once again, I'm going to draw that marquee, make it a little bit better, like so. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit just to see that it works. So I'm going to go Control-Shift-I. And now this is the inverse selection of what you want to keep. Now I'm going to go ahead here and click backspace. And watch what happens to the white space I don't need. It's gone. Okay? Now, if you want to get rid of the marquee tool or the selection, the best thing to do is it's called Select None. And Select None is done by going Control-D. If you go ahead and press that, the selection disappears, and I now have the NASA logo here with no real sort of wasted white space around the edges. Okay, so this logo is ready to go now. So what we can do is I'm just going to zoom out just a little bit, like so. And then I'm going to turn everything back on. And now I just want to make this NASA logo just that little bit bigger so it's in alignment with the BMW logo and the Apple logo. So once again, I'm going to right click on the NASA layer, right click, and go Convert to Smart Object. I'm going to go make sure NASA is selected. I'm going to go Control-T for the Smart Object transformation. And I'm just going to go hold down Alt and Shift and make that just a little bit bigger there. And there we go. Okay. Okay, so how does layering actually work in Photoshop? It's a pretty simple concept, and I shall demonstrate that to you now. So at the moment, we've got 4 components, or 4 layers in the layer panel here. We have the Apple logo, the NASA logo, the BMW logo, and the background. So basically this is how it works. The layer that's the very top of the hierarchy is the one that's most in front, and the layer that's at the very bottom of the list or the hierarchy is the one that's most in back. So I can show you now. If I take the Apple logo and move it over, you can see how the Apple logo is actually on top of the NASA logo, like so. But then what happens if I want to bring the NASA logo in front of the Apple logo? Well, the cool thing is in layers is that you can actually change the priority or the hierarchy of the layers. So for example here, if I click and hold on NASA and then drag it up above Apple, watch what happens. Now the NASA logo is now on top. How about the BMW logo? Let's move that over and see where move it over a bit. And as you can see here, it's at the most back, behind the NASA logo and the Apple logo. But what if I want to make the BMW one on top? Once again, click and drag to the very top. But you don't have to basically move it just to the top and the bottom. You can move anywhere in between. So now I can put the BMW logo in the very middle between the two, like so. Okay, so let's just move everything back again. All right, and here we go, like so. Okay, so the logos are all ready to go. The next thing I want to do is to create some guides to make the logos nicely aligned on the page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to activate the rulers. So that's Control R, and the rulers will appear. If you don't see the rulers, just hit Control R again. So here we go. We've got the canvas, we've got the rulers activated, and now I want to go ahead and create some guides. So once again, I'm going to go to the ruler at the very top here, hold down the left mouse button, and drag the guide down onto the canvas, like so. So now the next thing I want to make sure is that snapping is activated on all the layers. This means that I can effectively snap each logo onto the guide to make sure that everything is nicely aligned. So I'm going to go over here to the layers panel again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on, say, the top layer. This one is called Apple. Now I'm going to hold down the Shift button, hold it down, and I'm going to collect the remaining layers that have logos on them. Not the background, just the layers with the logo on them, like so. So all the layers are selected. I'm going to go ahead now to View, go down. As you can see, Snap is activated, which is good. Now if I go to Snap 2, it looks like Guides needs to be activated. And this is really important because we actually want to snap the logos onto the guides. So I'm going to activate that. And just to double check, if I go down again to Snap 2, as you can see, Guides has been activated. So there we go. Now I'm just going to go ahead now and just click one layer, maybe the top one, the Apple one, and I'm going to move it down onto the guide, and it should snap. There we go. It's nicely snapped to the guide. Next, with the NASA logo, I'm going to move it down until it snaps, like so. And then the BMW logo as well. I'm going to move that down here, and it will snap, like so. Let's just quickly check that that's actually, there we go, it's snapping to the guide there. So there you go. We now have all three logos nicely snapped to that guide. So there's just a few more things I want to teach you guys regarding layers here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the layers window here so it's easy to see. So I've got the layers window here, like it is, right? Now, at the very bottom of the layers window, you will find a whole list of buttons that you can access that do different types of things. The three I basically want to show you that are most important to you now are the trash bin, which you can see. There's a piece of paper icon and a folder icon. So it's pretty simple. If I click on this layer here, the Apple one, and I click the trash can, you've guessed it, it deletes that layer. It'll tell you if you want to delete it. If I say yes, the layer is gone. I'll just click Control-Z to undo that though. And then for example here, if I wanted to create a new layer, I would go ahead and click the paper icon and it'll create a new layer. You'll still have to name it a new name as well. But I'm going to delete that. Delete layer, why not? Okay. And then the very last icon I want to show you guys is the folder one, which is very handy because you will find that when you're working with Photoshop, you might have up to about 100 layers in your Photoshop file. So you want to make things nicely organized. So look what I can do here is I can click on the folder icon, like so. It creates a folder called Group 1. I'll just call this something obvious, folder, like so. And then what I can do is drag and drop the layers into this folder, and now all the layers are inside that folder now, and I can collapse it and everything looks nice and neat. Might just call that folder 1 actually, like so. So there you go. You have the trash bin, which deletes your layers, the new layer button, which is the piece of paper button, and then you have the folder button as well to create a new folder as well. Now, another cool tips to remember, for example, is that I'll just if you can take one of the layers, clicking on that, and you drag it down to the paper icon, watch what happens. It creates a copy of it, a duplicate. Now this is really important because you'll find that sometimes when you're running Photoshop, you might make a mistake with an image that's irreparable and you don't know what to do. So it's always good to make a copy of the images. So just in case if you do mess something up, you have a really good copy of that image to go back to as well. So there you go. I can go ahead and, create a duplicate of that layer. But I'll just delete this one here. Because what you can do, for example, is to take the whole folder and drag it down into the new layer icon, and it will create a copy of that whole folder, which then I can go ahead and just call backup. Okay, so I've got this folder here, folder 1, with all the working layers I want to use, but just in case something happens to them, I've got a backup folder here where you have the same layers that you can fall back on. So there you go. So the very last thing we need to talk about is saving that file. And obviously saving the file is very important. So once again, you want to go up to File here. Now, assuming that you have already saved the file at the start of the tutorial, all you need to do is go ahead and just select here, Save. There we go, and just go OK. Now, I know it's a no-brainer, but basically it's very important that you save that file. And make sure you save the file regularly. Every 1 to 2 minutes is a good practice. Because if you only save the file every half an hour to an hour, and then your computer crashes or something terrible happens, you lose all of that information and all that hard work you've put in. So make sure that you do save your file every couple of minutes, or every single time you make a big change to the file, save it. Cool. Well, I think that's pretty much it. Thanks very much, guys, and I will see you in the next video.